Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sketchy A.F. My name is Jonathan, and today I am joined by Andrea Aste, the artist, illustrator, animator, filmmaker, author, and many, many more things. I'm so happy to have you on the show. I've actually been so excited to sit down and talk to you about all of the many things that you do. And just start off, how are you today? How are you? Everything going good?
Splendiferously splendorous. I'm happy.
Wow.
I mean, it's great. It's a great day. It's here in England. It's sunny, a little bit windy. When there is the sun, you celebrate. It's an
Yes,
event.
absolutely. We've been enjoying a very uncharacteristically long run of good weather over here in Ireland too. We're not necessarily built for it, but we're making the most of it, definitely.
Well, as an Italian, as soon there is a little bit of sun, my mood immediately change, and I'm brighty, shiny, happy.
Brilliant, bright, shiny, happy people. That's what we need. So one of the things I love to start off every show with, I like to talk a little bit about how I came across the work of whoever the guest is on the show this week. So I actually came across your work very, very recently. It was my good lady wife. She came to me one day and she was like, "You need to check this guy out." And obviously, I would be an illustrator and an artist. She would read tarot and do a lot of healing and spiritual work. So she found your page and immediately went and said, "This is like a little section where our worlds kind of cross." And so I went in, I'm looking through the work, and I was just immediately blown away by how unique and so visually striking that your illustrations were. Honestly, it was one of those things that I couldn't really say that I'd seen anything quite like it. It was so brilliant, and you approached it in such a just unique way. And I thought as soon as I did, I went, I have to message him. I need to try and get an opportunity to sit down and chat with this guy. And I'm so, so glad that I did, because as I was saying, the work is just absolutely fantastic.
Well, I don't know what I mean. You make me blush. Thank you. I mean, it's my passion. It's my entire life. I mean, I really there are. I mean, the only way I can describe myself is say that I'm living for creating, and
Yes.
I always have a pencil in my hand. I'm always working on something. Is my passion. All my friends are always reproaching that I cannot even watch a film without having a piece of paper around because after 5 minutes I already sketching an idea, a note. So
Uh-huh.
I'm hyperactive, and it's okay.
That's great. I mean, I would imagine when, like, I was reading out the list of things that you would do there at the very beginning of the show in that introduction. And honestly, that's just the kind of tip of the iceberg, because you are a filmmaker, you have fashion designer, there's been clothes that you've done in there. You work doing the kind of stage show production as well. I mean, this list of hats that you wear is just seemingly endless. It just goes on and on and on. And I've just kind of thought,
You know,
how can you keep
if you want, it's very, very easy because I work just with two medias,
yeah,
images and words. I like the combination of the two, and this is one of the reasons why I move away from my original country, Italy, and I settle in England because here I'm free to create whatever I want.
yeah,
And when I was in Italy, galleries sometimes refuse my work or my ideas because imagine a gallery of art when, I mean, an exhibition when you enter and everything is strange because you have props, things that things that look ancient, and then you
yeah.
have a piece of animation, a video, and then you have classical art and something that is strange, and a book that looks ancient, and you can flip the pages and it's crazy with the documentary around it, and I say this is madness. We don't know how to sell it. We don't know what to do. Here is too crazy. It's not real art.
Yeah.
It's okay. So after having done the Venice Biennale, I was in the Italian pavilion, so with others artists, I escaped from my country very, very happily. As soon as I managed with the first version of the Book of Shadows, that is the project that you mentioned,
Yeah.
I spent months all around the globe. I invited to presenting the film, the book, and at the end I settled in London and I stayed there. Now I live in the countryside in the north, and I'm even happier. I love nature, and I think working sitting under a tree and with nothing around is incredibly better. Or watching at the seas. I mean, I love nature and solitude, so it's perfect.
Well, one of the things that I did want to ask, and I always ask everybody who comes on the show too, um, what was your background with art? Like, you must have a big, big passion and love for art to put in the amount of work and the amount of effort that you do. Do you remember where that journey really began? You know, where is it that you really kind of discovered this love of art coming into your life?
Yeah, but for many, many years, I was completely ashamed of my origins. Before coming in contact with, let's say, Anglo-Saxon culture or American culture, there is some trade union here and there. I never liked to talk about the origin of my art because I never study art. I'm a
Yeah.
self-taught artist. Everything I did, I study alone in my studio, just experimenting. When I did the first animation, I never did animation before, but I fell in love with the process. So I spent many, many hours drawing, testing the technique with the drawings that they became part of the animation and everything. So literally, I work days and night. I always love creating things. I always was a nerd, if you want. But for me, nerd is a very positive adjective. I'm
It
very
is.
proud of my nerdy side because I always love computer games and Dungeons and Dragons. Everything
Yeah.
started with Dungeons and Dragons. It is absolutely madness, but I love it. I was the kind of player that was, instead of telling you, the dungeon master is the one to create the story with everything. It's not just telling something like you find a parcel and you tell
Uh-huh.
what is inside. I was giving to the player the parcel, burn, stain. It looks real, a real prop, and then code it with a language that I invented, and they have to really decode it. They love that part, and so I started to create props and art just to tell the stories. Or when I was the player, not the dungeon master, I was illustrating every single character, every single important chapter of the story, creating like graphic novels about our adventures, and everything started like that.
Wow, I mean, that's such a unique way to come into it and find that love. And the thing, like you talked about almost being ashamed when you go to talk about your start in art, the fact like you're self-taught, you didn't go and get your formal training or anything. And I've always find that you do come across so many people nowadays who are self-taught. They've gone out and they've taught themselves the way to create the kind of art that they want to do. And the thing that I find is fascinating is when you do have someone who is self-taught in that way, they don't have the constraints there that they would have been had they have went through a formal art training. For me, I had my degree in graphic design and kind of visual communication in that way, and I find it almost very restrictive in a way. Whenever I finished my degree
Yeah,
and I went out to do my own work, I was instantly going back to the mindset of following these principles that you'd been taught in education, and it restricted your creativity, it restricted your imagination in a lot of ways, and I had to kind of re-educate myself to more of that
yeah,
childhood thought of just exploring and trying things out. And I think that when you look at people who are self-taught, and I look at your work, and I mentioned from the beginning, it was just visually so stunning, and it stood as this completely unique thing. And I think that's one of the big positives that you would have from being
yeah,
self-taught. You bring so much of your own uniqueness, your own personality, and your own creativity
yeah.
into it, and it comes across in your work without a doubt.
Oh, wow, thank you. No, I mean, as I say, this is the only way I can draw. This is the only way I can do animation. This is my style. I cannot. Sometimes people ask me, "Oh, convince me and say, oh, can you do something in this style?" I said, "No, I have my style. I refuse commission that are not in my style because it's just a waste of time." I discovered very, very early when. I started with, my career is very strange, my life is strange. I wanted to take my PhD at the Columbia University because I graduated in analytic philosophy. So I studied computer science, the mind. I love this kind of logical things,
Yeah,
scientifics and whatever. And I started working to gather the money to because it's incredibly expensive to study at to take a PhD at the Columbia University. But while I started working, all my passion went around. I started to work as a copywriter in an advertising agency.
yeah,
That is it's a very interesting process from the creative point of view, but it's a total waste of time for me. I'm speaking for
yeah.
myself, for my values. Spending time creating something just to make people buy something that has not real value, make it many times,
Hmm.
it's like that. I said, I don't want to spend my life like that. So I started writing my own stories, illustrating and everything. And then one day I said, you pay me very little money because Italy, it's always very difficult to make a money. I tell you, I have no shame to say that when I started working as a copywriter, I have £200 a month of wage. When I left, I have something like 900. That is not enough to make a living.
Yeah,
And I was creating advertising for Lavazza, Ferrero, Alfa Romeo. Big brands. So they
yeah,
were making the money and we were struggling. So
Mhm.
we're stuck. So I said, I don't want to spend my life like that. I prefer to go alone. I prefer to follow my dreams. And I jump into what now is my full-time job. I mean, from books, as you said, I created books, illustrated. As an author, I illustrated books from other authors, or I created theater shows with really, really big production too. I mean, one of the best show I did it was in Italy with Arturo Brachetti. There is a very, very famous worldwide quick change performance magician. He has, I mean,
Yeah.
he's so big that he has two, you say knighthood, is Knight of the French Republic for
Oh,
artistic
yes, yeah.
merit. And for the Italian one, I mean, he's a big, big name. And he called me to have a show with him. So I was doing animation and live painting performances on stage for we did Peter and the Wolf by Prokofiev. And I love it because till now almost everything I do is the first time that I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Or doing it in that way or in this specific way. And I like that because in this way every time is new. Uh, and I love the feeling of jumping in, I don't know, a triangular book instead of a rectangular one,
Yeah.
mental reality and then animation and then it's fantastic. I mean, I live for that. I love this kind of challenge, and I mean, it's great.
I kind of resonate with what you were talking there about when you went in to do your work as a copywriter because it's very similar to the experience I had, where my love was illustration and fine art, but I chose to go and study graphic design because I felt, financially it would be a safer choice to make, and I wasn't following my passion. I was doing what other people thought I should do as opposed to doing what I truly wanted myself. And then when I got to the point where I actually started working as a graphic designer, it was a situation where I got lucky that I ended up working for a very, big company in the city that I was living in down in Belfast here in Ireland at the time. But the problem was, as soon as I got in the door and started doing that work, I realized that my heart isn't in this, my passion isn't in this. And I remember having that kind of feeling of, first of all, there was a tremendous degree of, oh no, have I just wasted all this time in education studying something that I don't actually care or feel passionate about whatsoever? And I began I was 20 years old at the time, and I was the first job that I had ever gotten working in that industry. And I just remember feeling like I can't put my life into this. I can't be in this situation where I feel like it's almost like you're kind of selling out this precious thing, this love of art and this creativity. It's such a delicate, precious, important thing. And I felt like I'd completely left it behind. I'd abandoned it. And because of that experience, I actually ended up, I quit that job. But the problem that I had was at such a young age, I didn't really have the, I suppose, mental strength to go back into the areas that I wanted to go in. And I took about an 11-year absence where I didn't do any artwork whatsoever. And I had that voice in my head telling me to constantly go back to it. And it was only because we have two children and I was telling them that they should follow their dreams and they can be anything that they want to be, that I kind of realized, oh, how can I teach this to them when this is not what I had done? And so I embarked getting back into my journey to getting back to illustration and doing the things that I wanted to do. But for me, I mean, this happened when I'm 32 years old, and it takes a lot of self confidence. It takes a lot of self belief to take that leap. And when you talked about how
Yeah.
you left that copyright job to kind of just go out on your own and to bet on yourself, that must have been a very difficult thing. Because when I look at you and the content, like I watch the reels that you put up on Instagram, and you are just such a positive person. You have that energy to you, and I watch your stuff and I feel happy having just watched you. Was there times when you were making those decisions that it was difficult for you, or did you just have that self belief that you were going to do it and that's what it was, or
I
how did you approach?
I wish it was that easy. No, I think every major, I mean, yes, as you say, I think I'm a positive person, but the point is that I'm not positive because I don't fear. I have lots of fears, but I manage to cope with them or to face them. Fears mean I mean, one of the major fear for an artist is my art is not enough. I'm not good
Yeah.
enough. Well, the answer is why you're not good enough because you compare your technique, your style, your something, whatever you create, with something that the idea that you have in your mind, and the idea is always better than the result. I mean, usually for me it is like that. I spoke with other artists of mine. They say the
Hmm.
vision I had before painting was perfect. I painted and it's not there. I have to repaint it again, and they follow for all their time. The vision they had, and I think this is the mechanism for creating more and more. But then you can say, okay, maybe I lack some. technique here. So you start studying, exercising, and everything. And at a certain point, I think you realize that your style is your style. You don't have to force it, to modify it, to be perfect. It's just he has to communicate. When communicates, when he says what you wanted to say, or even more, it's good. It's better. You don't have to overthink. You have to be spontaneous in the act of creativity. And for answering your question, I mean, fears. Yes, I fear a lot of things. I changed countries many times.
Mhm.
I let's say that I always know what I wanted, and because it was difficult to obtain it in the country, in my own country, I was forced to leave at a certain point. I said, "Oh, I die here without achieving my goals, give up my dreams, or I leave." And I never liked to stay in Italy. Actually, I don't like the mentality. I mean, I love my country, I love my culture a lot. Dante, all the Renaissance, the art. I mean, it's full of art. It's
Mhm.
beautiful. The food. I mean, it's a very beautiful people too. Very open-minded, but it's a very conservative country. It's a very
Yeah.
traditional one. And as a gay person, politically active in my country, and then as an artist, it was incredibly tough, my life. So I said, well, why I have to suffer that much? Why I have to let people tell me that what I'm doing is not art? Because one of the galleries that I work with refused, in the middle of an exhibition I had, to keep going on with the exhibition when she discovered that I illustrating books, because in Italy, if you illustrate books, you are not a real artist anymore.
Right.
And
Okay.
not reality, no, I don't want that. This is cutting the wings of people. So,
Yeah.
went away. Is this the reason why I'm writing in English, even if my English is not perfect when I talk? When I write, because I take the time that I need, I can check the grammar, I can do it. So it's a lot of effort if you want. It's not fast as writing as in Italian.
Yeah.
But I set it as a goal. And now I'm writing and publishing my books in English. Of course, I need an editor here and there. Nothing is perfect, but I'm not scared about this process. So fears is always there, but at a certain point, I mean, you have to face them, not to avoid them, and say, okay, I'm fear of moving. Why? Because you fear not to make it, because it's another country, because, and you have a list of fears. And you say, well, but life is experimenting. If you take everything too seriously, you never achieve anything, because even crossing the road is dangerous. I mean, everything can happen.
Yeah.
Statistically, a car can hit you. I mean, but it's
Mhm.
not a go out anymore for that. So I just jumped, and I'm happy for that. I'm really, really happy to have done it.
Yeah, I get like I mean that's a lovely way of actually putting it because I kind of find when I was getting back into art and the first thing I did was I put up a video here on this YouTube channel. It was the first video I did where I just said that I've run away from art for over a decade. Here are the reasons why, and this is me starting this journey. If you would like to follow it, as I kind of document me getting back to this thing that I was always passionate about. And I remember at the time, I was before I kind of clicked the publish button to put that video up there. I was terrified of putting myself out there, putting something up into the world because it is your art is very personal. And when you're attaching yourself so publicly to it in the way that I decided I kind of needed to, there was a great degree of fear. You're worried about how people are going to react to it. You're worried about negativity that might come to it. And the one thing that helped me overcome all of that was, first of all, as I mentioned, I wanted to be able to be there to set a positive example for my kids as they grew up. And I felt that I needed to show them that, instead of just telling them, I need to physically show them that this is something they can do. But the other thing I thought was, well, and I can't remember where I heard it, but I remember I was watching, some kind of like motivational video or something on YouTube, and the thing went. The quote that it came out with was something along the lines of, "There's no greater fear than not chasing your dreams, and as frightening as it might be to take that step and to take that leap, never doing it, that should be the thing that really scares you." And I kind of sat with
Yes,
that for quite a while and just really kind of pondered over it. And every time I've kind of encountered any challenges of maybe just mentally for myself of worrying about the things that I'm going to do, I always kind of go back to that. And I find like that to be a tremendously inspiring thing. And that's why the
yes,
likes of doing stuff like this podcast now, I still would have, before everyone comes up in the screen, I'm already sitting here and I'm kind of, I'm frightened. Like I have that sort of social anxiety in a lot of ways, and I have to kind of remind myself about it every single time that I sit down. And I find it like a very centering thing. It's almost kind of meditative in a way, and it just helps me to be able to push that fear away and to continue going away on the path that I'm going. But it's really interesting to hear that it was something that you had experienced too, because I was just
yes,
watching your videos and I thought this guy's doing so many different things. He's doing them so incredibly well, and he's just so positive. And I was very curious that were there those struggles along the way, or did you just have this iron will? But it is so positive to see that, even someone
Yeah.
who is spinning all those plates still has those little struggles that they go through themselves.
Absolutely. I saw many of the videos that you have on your channel, and I know that you know the market very, very, very well. And I love your interviews. I mean, all the no, it's fantastic. It's really, really inspirational. But I mean, I'm very flattered that you see me like that. I mean, I see myself as a person that is closing in their own studio, creating his own world. But if you imagine that, even after all the success that I have with televisions and theater and books and interviews everywhere, I still don't have an
Yeah,
agent. When I propose my art, my style for illustrating things to agencies, they usually refuse me. And they refuse me with one line: it's too personal. Is I don't know how to use it commercially, because they are narrow-minded. When you present
yeah,
something to a publisher, the first thing that, I mean, I created a book that is in a triangular box. It's a triangular book with its oracularium, is a deck. You take the cards, and with your mobile, an animation go out. When I presented the first time to a publisher, they say, a triangular book? I never see something like that. Anathema, no, no, no. We cannot publish it. People will not read it. I said, this is the point. Not to make you read it, but to make original. There is a reference, a quote, because it's an oracle game. So it's
uh-huh.
something you playing with the future and something like that. I wanted to quote the eye, the classical representation of God, like an eye inside a triangle. So the importance of the triangular box was pivotal. But at the end, again, whenever, I don't know if you have the same experience, whenever you want to do something that is a little bit outside the box, the market doesn't know how to take it. So
Yeah,
everything so that I did as self-published, self-promoting, self-investing in my own project. So I achieved total independence, because almost 90% of my projects are all crowdfunded, or I created with my own energy, my own money, investing in producing them. And
yeah,
because I believe in them, and so I risk everything every time, and I'm still here. I mean, I'm happy. But
yeah.
I don't find it right. I don't find it right that I have to take this kind of challenges too. I would like just to draw, to illustrate, to think about my world, and not to deal with keeping everything, producing, shipping, selling. I mean, keeping track with everything and communicating with people is incredibly tough. So this is the reason why I
Yeah.
said day and night, because or you do it, or you cannot make it, or you have to give up your dreams, or make just one thing, one project. But I have many ideas, and life is short. I don't
Yeah.
want to realize just one thing and then say, well, I didn't have the time. Mm,
Well, I did have something quite similar. The experience I would have quite a lot. A lot of the art that I produce at the moment, it's all centered around my hometown. It is Armagh. It is this city here in Ireland, and it's something that's been, depicted in art by many different people. And generally, it's always been done in what I would describe as more of a traditional way of doing it. And a lot of the illustrations that I do, I tried to go completely the other direction. I thought if I'm going to walk a path that a lot of other people have walked before me, I want to do it in a very different, very unique, and a very original way. And I would bring a lot of my work down to craft fairs, and I would get people to come up. And the most common thing that people always say is, "Oh, this is very like I've not seen anything quite like this before." And that was completely deliberate because I think that there are great artists who depict, tremendously great techniques with their paintings and so on. But I did want to stand out, to be a little bit different, and it can be polarizing. There are people who look at the work and they don't know how to take it. They
yeah,
can't quite place it, and there are people then who absolutely love it. And what I find is a lot of the customers who have come and purchased my work and have it in their home, they then come back because they want to get whatever the next piece it is or whatever the next piece, and they're regular returning customers. And I think that it's one of those situations where I would rather sell less of a thing that I enjoy doing than sell more of something that I'm not really that invested in. Because I feel it would be so limiting, and it would take away from the actual joy and the love that I have of creating this art.
I agree.
But
I
it's
agree.
definitely something that I went through.
I noticed that there is a gap that is quite humongous and quite dramatic between the market. And with the market, I say, producer, publisher houses, galleries, they don't want to risk, they don't want to invest, many of
Yeah.
them. You cannot generalize, but 90% of the cases like that. And then people that want to buy, want to read new things, want to see new things. So if you
Yes.
get rid of the middleman, you can reach immediately the market, not the market, exclude the market, but the people that will buy your stuff. You discover that a lot of people are more open-minded than the publisher that is supposed to publish your book. And then again, usually they don't pay you that well anymore. It's very difficult to
Yeah.
make a living with royalties. So it's far more convenient be self-produced, self-published, because in this way you can leave it. I make a calculation with the last contract that I was offered to from an American publisher that I will not name, of course, and
Yes.
to reach, of course, to reach the same amount of money in royalties and item books that if I produce, I sell, to have the same amount of money, I have to the publisher house has to sell something like 1,500 books. To have the same amount from that royalty of selling books, I have to sell something like 60, 70 books. So I
Yeah.
said, okay, I know that I can sell 70 books. So why I have to wait to that someone else sell 1,500 books when I can make the same money with just 60? I mean, this is
Yeah.
crazy. So if I have to pay I mean, if everyone else, I mean, I'm not rich, I'm not coming from a rich family. It was a working class family. So
Uh-huh.
I know the value of money, and I prefer to do everything by myself at this point because I can sell alone far more than 60 books. So I know that with that I can pay the bill. So why I have to be bothered and then have no the freedom to do what I want? Because you know very well, publisher or producer try to change your art because it can be
Yeah.
offensive for whatever they think, not because it's offensive, because they are fears of
Yes. Yeah.
whatever they fears. And it is why you have to do it at the end.
Well, I suppose that is one of the big advantages, and as you'd mentioned, you've had 2 projects now that have been successfully crowdfunded, and that's how you've went in. I believe Kickstarter, was it, that you'd used for the Book of Shadows? Um,
Yes, I did two
that's
versions of the Book of Shadows with Kickstarter, and I did Oracularium with Kickstarter. So three Kickstarter campaign now I run. So good in different years because I mean
yeah.
I need time to create. I mean, every project of mine, because the Book of Shadow is a film with 20 minutes of animation, and the film is 1 hour and 24 minutes, something like that. Plus, there is a
Yeah.
book, there is a graphic book, plus a graphic novel, plus a book of magic. Then there is the deck. So for creating everything, it took maybe 5 years, something like that. So it's
Wow.
a huge investment in time. But of course, imagine creating alone a film to create just 24 minutes of animations. I
Yeah.
spent something like 8 months working from 7, 8 in the morning till 2, 3 in the morning.
Wow.
All around the
That's incredible, yeah.
but I love it so much, and it's okay. But at the end, all you find collaborators that believes in the project had gone. At the time, I was still living in Italy. No one wanted to help me to create an animation and a film because they say you never did it, so why I have to
Mhm.
believe in you? I said, well, I believe in myself. I do it alone. If the option is losing the dream of doing it alone, well, I know that I can do it. I will do it. I mean, it was quite tough because when I finished, I don't know. I mean, I always was thin, but after that. I was incredibly thin. I mean, it was really, really tough. But
Yeah.
my was incredible, and I was right. Thanks to the success of the project, I spent 3 months in the States presenting the book and the film, and then with the money made, I lived in London for a lot of years. I mean, I freed myself.
Yeah, I mean that's for me. Whenever I looked over some of the work that, or some of the information you put up about the book and going through that crowdfunding thing, I find it incredibly inspirational because for me, there are projects that I have, and I'm sure you definitely are living proof of it. Whenever you're a creative person, there isn't just one thing that you want to do. I always kind of find myself sitting there and just going, I want to do this and I want to do that, and I want to, we have so many different ideas, and crowdfunding is one of the things that I have often considered going down the route of. As of yet, it's not something that I've properly pursued at the moment, but I was curious from a creator who has crowdfunded their work, who's got that work made, had it out into the world. And I mean, Book of Shadows, it's been a great success. Obviously, there are people who absolutely love that book. I mean,
Yeah.
it's one of the ones that I'll be picking up. As a creator who went through that crowdfunding route, to create your work. How did you find that experience? Like, what? How did you promote your work? How did you get your Kickstarter out there in front of people who were going to be an audience who would be interested? And was there any kind of, I suppose, idea you had of how to go about the entire process?
It's quite, I mean, Kickstarter, or when you say Kickstarter, whatever the crowdfunding project, I think it's a very tough experience because, first of all, the
Hmm.
first things that I found very difficult is that you are still working on the project because usually you crowdfund everything when you already have finished. You need the money to produce, to
Yeah,
print, to everything, but you cannot. I mean, if you take 3 years to create a big project like that, you cannot say, you fund me now, and from 3 years I will give you something because it's crazy. So I have to do all the work before, and then it was just necessary the last step to produce everything
yeah,
physically. And the most difficult thing is to find a way to communicate what you've done in few sentences, strong, right, with the right visual, because your head always exploded. And every time you try to define the project, but it's even this, it's even that, it's not this, and everything became a mess because you say too much or you don't say in the right way. So for me, the most difficult thing is to communicate in the right way. But then I do it with passion. I do a moment of silence. I don't think about anything anymore. I said, okay, if you have to talk with someone that don't know anything, how can you do it? And then I discovered that it's not important that you describe the project, but that you make people dreams about the project. They have to feel it, not to know every technicality. They have to feel it, to
yeah,
live it, to perceive it. And then again, if you think about money is important, but it's never the goal. Even in a Kickstarter campaign, of course you need it because if you don't reach it, you cannot do it. Of course, in that
yeah.
way, it's the goal. But if you do a Kickstarter campaign just to have the money, you lose the potentiality of Kickstarter. I
Hmm.
went there with the idea of finishing the part of the graphic novel. I left the face of the supervillain white, and I said, I mean, no painted, and I said, who want to be the supervillain? If you pledge at this level, you can be the supervillain. And a woman did it, and it was incredibly amazing. Have an interview and take pictures there and laughing. And I created the part of the graphic novel thanks to her, to the approach. And then again, what I achieved there is creating a community, sharing very honestly, even the
Yeah.
problem. Like, okay, I received today the mock-up of the printing. There is a big problem. The blue is not the blue I wanted. So
Hmm.
I will be a little bit late. Look, this is the blue I want. This is the one is printed. What do you think about it? You see, it's not right. Sometime I was even there opening for the first time, and the things that the printer was given to me, crying for happiness, and people were seeing because it's beautiful when you see something that is in your hand, and
Yeah.
then you see here, you see it printed, you can touch it, you can open it. And I the kind of person that get very emotional when I see something finally realized after all the ideas, the struggling, because you have to think about the plot, the drawing, and the things that don't come as you want, and then you redraw, because I'm a perfectionist. But then, if you go on Kickstarter with the idea of sharing, communicating, to create a sense of community, I mean, the Kickstarter campaign, I don't remember when I finished. I think I finished almost 1 year ago. I'm still in contact with them. I'm still talking
Yeah.
with people. I mean, not all of them, but I discovered that they want to know more. They want to so. I created more things. They wanted to know how to use the car, so I created some videos. Then I create uh, lessons online, and then special edition about the graphic novel and the film, and people love it. And we created a very strong community of people that love what I've done. This
Yeah.
parallel work. And I think if you have a project and you go with the idea of making the money and sharing yourself, sharing your passion and ideas, you ended up with money, friends, supporters, and a life that exploded. Exploded,
Yeah.
it can explode in so many different directions that you would be overwhelmed. I mean, this is my experience.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that I've always said is, and especially with doing stuff like this and the YouTube channel and everything, where we live in an age where I think that people are as connected to the artist as they are to the art. With the kind of openness that social media gives us, they want to know more about the person who created the thing. And when they kind of develop that kind of connection with the person, they're more likely to follow them, to support them, and so on. And I mean, it works perfectly for you because your personality just leaps through the screen every time you put up one of the videos. So I think you were certainly a very personable person to be able to front a project like that. But of course, we're talking there a lot about the Book of Shadows. It was the first sort of thing then that I seen of yours that I got to really kind of delve in and look through some of the work that you did. And one of the things that was, are the actual visually striking artwork that you do, the scale of that project was something that just I was completely mesmerized by because, as we mentioned, it's a graphic novel, it's a book, it's a tarot deck, it is a film, the mockumentary, like everything that went into that book. It is such a huge project, and I did kind of wonder because I have a few ideas of different projects that I have in my own head, and sometimes I sit back and I think about the scale of that project and how much goes into it. And it can seem almost a little bit overwhelming. Like the way I kind of explain it would be if you imagine you're stood at the foot of this giant mountain and it can be intimidating in a lot of ways. When you first came up with the idea for this project, did you feel in any way intimidated by the size of the job you were undertaking? Or did you have any little ways where you just kind of take it step by step in order to be the most productive and creative version of yourself in it? Or how did you come across your approach to that project?
Usually, when I start a project, if when I started the Book of Shadows, the first time I did it, I wanted just to create a deck of cards for an exhibition. But
Yeah,
then, drawing it, I started to have a fantasy about an imaginary world, and I started to add things. When I created the props, that is the manuscript of The Alchemist, it's a real manuscript because I draw
yeah,
every single pages and everything, and then I antiquate it with a technique that I invented and experiment myself. Then I started to translate it because it was just something in my mind. When I was drawing, stories was developed. And I realized that it was so beautiful, so powerful, so visionary that I needed to go on. And so I went on and on and on. And then, of course, yeah, you have to have the business side. I mean, I'm
hmm,
not ashamed to say that when I started the Book of Shadows, I went to my bank account and I said, okay, because I realized that I need a lot of time and I have to concentrate 24 hours, 24/7 only on that project. And it was quite a big task. So I said,
yeah,
how many months I can live without taking commissions and dedicate fully myself to the project. And I calculate and I said, in that amount of time, I have to finish it. Otherwise, I'm dead. And then you do it because it's a vision. I never regret it. I mean, thanks to that project, I'm living in a foreign country. I started writing in another language. I met incredibly amazing people from writers, musicians, followers, incredibly brilliant minds, and I love it. It opened the door of my life and make it better in a way that is incredible. And I don't speak about the
that,
economic part. I think about the satisfaction, the connection, the energy that is surround the project is amazing. So of course I can. I mean, then for me it's not like working. It's like I always say it, and I'm 5 years old guy with a very old look because I never grow. For me, working is not working, is playing. I
yeah,
draw when I do an illustration. I mean, I mean, I live here in with a friend of mine in it's a share house. They have a big studio and everything because I mean it's an amazing place. And when he saw me drawing and everything, he said, "But you laughing, you dancing, you singing, you're laughing." Yes, because it's fun.
yeah.
Is a feeling that you are in, when you say is you are in the zone and is beautiful.
I think that comes across in the work because I just think there's so much. When I watch the little videos that you have up on your Instagram or your TikTok, your personality is absolutely what you're producing. Like so much of, I see the parallels between the man creating the art and the art itself. It's just, it's so vibrant, it's so flamboyant, it's just, it's there, it's great, it's loud, and I've just like, there's such a wonderful connection that I see between the two things. And I was actually looking through on your website, you had one of the little sections up on your website, you had some of your original paintings that you had. I believe you'd read on it that it was kind of oils that you'd used, and I found that the paintings that you did every bit as visually striking as some of the digital illustration that you had up for Book of Shadows. And I was just so curious, considering that you haven't then come from like formal art training. When I looked at them, there were elements I found of slight maybe influences of the likes of Cubism in the way some of them were constructed. And I was curious, is there influences from art movements or specific artists or things that you've seen in your journey in art that have
Yeah.
influenced that visual style for you?
Yeah. I was. like a bookworm for all my time almost. So I spend time reading tons and tons of books because I always prefer the company of people that from thousands of years than the people surrounding me. So anyway, it's not nice, but now it's
Mm.
different.
I
Anyway, I
agree with
love
you
it
on
so
that one anyway.
now I'm blushing anyway. And so I read a lot. Then I studied Greek and Latin. So I started to, I mean, in high school. So I was translating, and then you go, I mean, you were in contact with different art, style of art, way of doing things, and ancient languages and everything. And I love it. So everything, all my passions combined in the Book of Shadows. While for the artistic part, the stylistic part of it, I think the movement that influenced me the most was Expressionism, the German Expressionism
Uh-huh.
above all, because from the film above all, when I started the Book of Shadows, I have the cabinet of Dr. Caligaris in my mind. I wanted to create that kind of feeling, that kind of energy.
Yeah.
So I love silent films. So when I decided to move to moving and animation, I want to the beginning of it. So the fixed camera and doing everything and with the green screen adding and creating layers, and it was absolutely, I mean, it's like a magic lantern. I really love it. And I think I mean that kind of art shape my style. Then I discovered Mebius when I was, I mean, far later, and I fall in love with this and his artistry, and then tons and tons of other artists. And everyone suggests me something or give me an idea or a vision of a point of view. I think it's every artist has to be omnivorous. You have to read, you have to watch, you have to be curious. Without curiosity, you cannot produce. I mean, I guess this is
Yeah.
my view. I mean, I don't know. I can be wrong, but I think is an important element.
Yeah. Well, I always thought it was interesting because it's one of those things where I suppose I kind of spend a lot of time trying to work out what I wanted my visual style to be. Particularly, I have ideas of books. Primarily, I know something that I'm working on at the moment is I wanted to do a children's book, and I've tried around experimenting with different types of illustration styles to see what visual style I feel would suit the script that I've written better. In terms of when you sit down to do then a project like Book of Shadows, did you just know visually like this is what this book's going to look like, or was there a kind of bit of an experimenting and a bit of a feeling out process for you to try and find that visual style that suited your story?
Because I have just my style, I solved the
Yeah.
problem in the beginning. I cannot do it in another style. Was what was the challenge was the, let's say, the design, how the frames combine, because I didn't want rectangular or classical rigid frame, square
Yeah.
or rectangular, but I wanted something more dynamic. So I have to find my rhythm for the narration and the narrative and everything. And I think that was the experimentation. Then again, when you start doing something, I don't think you have to know the final product. You have a feeling, you know what you want to communicate, and you discover what you're doing, why you are doing it. This is my
Yeah.
process. Like when I was painting, it's not, I have a vague idea. I mean, of course, you have an idea of what you wanted, but then while you're painting, the colors change, the shapes change, and takes a life from his own. And I think this is the exact things that I did with the Book of Shadow. If I tell you that I never did, I know that this is completely crazy because it's madness. I know the story. It was in my head, and I wrote down the key point. I never did a storyboard. I
Yeah.
was reporting the Book of Shadows, page by page. I was doing one page of storyboards, a spread,
Hmm.
painting it, another storyboard, painting it. And I did all my job like that, even for the animations. I don't create all the animation in one row. I know
Yeah.
where we are, even by commission, and sometimes people is a little bit, I mean, overwhelmed by the process because they want to see everything. I said, but if you draw everything in one row, there is no more space for. I mean, I can do it, but then you have to be prepared to change everything every time because new ideas can come, they can be better. And I think you have to be open to the possibility of changing everything if you realize that you have a better idea. So why not? And of
Yeah.
course, you have to consider the money, you have considered the time, you have considered the business part of everything. If you can allow it, why not do it?
Yeah. So when you talk about obviously the story of tarot that gets told throughout the Book of Shadows, what was it about? Like, was tarot something that you already had this interest in? Like, what was your introduction to tarot, and why was that story something that made you want to pursue it in this story?
I have a very splendiferous childhood, thanks to my mother. My mother was a tarot reader, but
Oh
not.
yes,
I
okay.
mean, imagine Italy is a secret. There is a very powerful Catholic Church. It's a very conservative country. At the time, we talk about the 80s. Uh, you don't say it. My mother was not
Yeah.
making herself. I mean, she was not making a living. She was not asked money for reading the cards. She was reading the cards for friends, for other member of the family. And I remember the way she was using tarot because it was spooky, it was amazing. Imagine as a kid, you have a series of cards with very strange illustrations, and
Hmm.
stories emerge from that cards. And you are brought in different spaces, in different countries and times, and it's absolutely amazing. Then my mother was quite, I mean, a very creative person and a very cheeky because she was spreading the cards on the table and said, used to say something like, "The cards are telling me that it's time for you to go to bed." Oh, I see you misbehave today. Of course, she knew that we misbehave as kids, but for other reasons. She was using the tarot to tell this, and I found that magic. Then he was the
Yeah.
kind of person that I don't know. I think he's you are. Well, yes, he's a Catholic country, so you know what I'm talking about. Um, um, there is the All Saints Day, the Day of the Dead. In Italy, in the North Italy, there is a tradition to put on the table a bowl of milk and boiled chestnuts during the night. And during
Uh-huh.
the night, the ghost of my grandmother was because I mean my mother has lost her mother long ago, and we were as kids were waiting for the ghost of my grandma coming to drink the milk and ate.
Yeah.
It's not, and I remember, I mean, then I discovered late, of course, it was my mother running in the kitchen in the morning, eating everything, this is making disappear everything, and then there was just the crumbles there, and my gosh, mom came, my grandma came, and so we were surrounded with this kind of magic atmosphere with
Yeah.
storytelling and the occult and religion, but in a very, I would say, primordial way, very instinctive way, very beautiful. Not the religion that
Yeah.
is the zealot, that is oppressive, choking. No, it was
Yeah.
very, very alive, very beautiful, very, yes, traditional, if you want. Was mixed between a lot of stuff. There are no Catholicism, but it's beautiful. And so, with my art, with my world, I want to recreate the same feelings that I had when I was a child. The feeling of magic, the feeling of wonder, the feeling of follow your dreams because it's important. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's such a beautiful way to approach it. That's fantastic, and that just makes me more excited to have and hold that book and bringing that sort of energy to it. Like that's an amazing thing and such a great story.
Oh,
So
thank you.
when we're talking there about Book of Shadows, where was the first? When do you remember having that first idea for this project? Where were the little seeds that started that you were going to
The
attempt
first
this book?
started with a series of tarot and immediately I visual in my head.
Hmm.
Then, while this is crazy, I know, but while cooking, I started to feel one of my fictional character that I used for an exhibition I held it was held in a natural history museum in Turin. It was a very
Yeah.
crazy collection of fictional animals inspired by real animals. So there was the pair, the real animal and the fictional one.
Yeah.
And I created a Victorian and Elizabethan explorer. And while cooking and while I was, I mean, when I was started to, I've already started to create a Book of Shadows, I have this character coming to me and started to telling me, oh, when I was sailing away on the coast of Chipango, this is what happened. And I stopped cooking and I said, go slow. I have no time to record all your adventures. So one by one, the characters came to tell me the story. They were alive in my hand. I was talking with them. It was incredibly powerful. I think an artist lives in two worlds, the physical world and the world of his imagination. And there is
Yeah.
no difference between the two realities. One is not less real than the other is amazing. You say, do you invented everything? Yes, actually, I was inventing everything, but I feel like I was just there listening. And this is the role of the muse. If you think about the role of the muse in classical Greek and the ancient world, it
Yeah,
was it was the man, the divinity coming to you, inspiring you. So the role of the artist was not the one of egocentric person create, but was almost like a priest, holy person receiving something that is not belong to him and just giving to people. And I feel very
yeah,
close to this kind of feeling. Yes, I create everything, but I feel like I'm intermediary between the characters that are there in my books, in my stories, and the visuals, and myself. So this is why I never understand these super egomaniac artists. I have to treat everyone badly, and they're full of, I don't know, crazy stuff.
yeah. It's quite
My
in
philosophy is don't bother me, let me walk.
I think this is so interesting because it's even making me one of the things that I find when I get to sit down and have these opportunities to speak to other artists and speak to other creators, I always come away finding that I've learned something from them. And just when you were talking there about the character was coming to you and they're telling you their story, I have a story that is intended to be a comic book that I've been writing, and I kind of found this was the first thing that I ever really sat down to seriously try and write. And it was this big story, but I remember feeling at the time, how do I approach this? How do I kind of tackle these themes, tackle these characters? But when I found that I got into actually writing a scene, what I noticed is it wasn't really so much me sitting down and writing out a scene. I felt that I was just in that scene. I was every single one of those characters, and I'm just having the conversations in my own mind that are happening there and just writing
Yeah,
down. And it felt almost like when you hear people talk about automatic writing, there's stuff coming through and you're in that moment, you're in that place, and it's this because you had mentioned about living in those two worlds. And I'm like,
yeah,
that's exactly the experience that I had. I was right there in that world with those characters, being them, feeling them, understanding their emotions, their motivations, and it just came so naturally at that point. And I think that's one of those really beautiful things when you do practice anything creative, whenever you can just click into that other part of your brain or that other part of reality, and just
yeah,
the stories and the images just flow through you in that way. And
yeah.
it's great. I didn't even realize that, I suppose, until you've just mentioned it. And my brain, I'm
No,
like,
but
oh
is important. I mean, the question that you pose before starting a work, like you have a character and you ask, how do you portray this character? How I
yeah,
dress it, the facial expression and everything. But if you start asking too many questions, you go on the road, you never do anything. The question has to stay here, but then you have to take this one, and this is the answer. So how do I visual this character? To take a piece of paper, you start drawing it, and the characters, page after page, is drawing after drawing. Sometimes it's immediate. That is wow. In one
yeah,
draw, you have a character. Sometimes I have this kind of stuff, and I said, "Oh my!" I mean, it's already there. It's perfect. It's incredible. And sometimes you have to do hundreds of drawings because there is something is not there. It's not there. It's not it's the right thing. You don't know why, but it's not there. And so you have to just draw and let your ability to immerse yourself in your job and doing it. I don't like. I mean, I'm not a religious person. I'm not a Catholic. I mean, I
yeah,
received a Catholic education, of course, but I'm not. I'm a Buddhist. So anyway, but there is always a line in the Bible that I found incredibly interesting, and I think maybe it was misunderstood. I don't know. But think about when they say that we were created in. And now I don't know how to say in English, with the same likehood of God or something like that.
yeah. Created in God's image. Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I have the Italian expression. I didn't know how to say it, so thank you so much. We never ask why. We always think in the why we are similar to a god, because we
yeah,
create. As a god creates something, we create our own reality, our own culture, the houses, the art, and everything. We are creative people, and so I think the future for humanity, I mean, I would like to see it free from jobs that are not creative, because we have machine to do it, and let
yeah,
the creativity to human beings, because everyone is creative. Every time say, "Oh, but I don't have your imagination." No, it's not that you don't have. It's that you are not used to listen to it. And like people say, they say, "Oh, I don't dream." I mean, it's physical. Every one of us dreams. It's not possible not to dream. It's that you don't remember it then. It's that you don't pay attention to them. It's just a matter of listening, to tune yourself to what you are. Imagine
I think
if
that's a
we
lovely view
oh,
for the world. That would be great. If we can get to that point where people can just sit and have that freedom and that opportunity to express themselves. Because one of the things
yeah,
that I've always found, and I've talked about it so many times on this channel, when I talked about that period of time where I went away and wasn't doing anything artistic for, 11 or 12 years or whatever it was, I kind of, and I didn't realize it at the time. It's only in hindsight when you look back on these things that it makes sense. During that period of time, my mental health was just in the worst place that it could have been in my life. And the reason that it was there is because I didn't have any creative outlet to take the things that I had in my head, the things that I had in my heart, and to put them out into the world. And I think that I got the opportunity back in February to go and speak to students who were art students at a local school. And I remember going in and I was very kind of, I didn't know how to approach it. And I thought, I've never done anything like this. What am I going to tell these people? Like, this is, I don't know what to do here. And I thought that the one thing, if I could instill one message to anyone who was there in that room that day, it would be that if you go to pursue a career in anything artistic, that's fantastic. If you choose to go and pursue a career in any other place, great. But the one thing that you should always do is hold on to whatever creative outlet you have, whether it is drawing or painting or writing or dance, whatever that thing is for you. If you let it go, you're giving up a great tool that you have in your arsenal to make sure that you live a more complete, a more true, and a more healthy life. And that was just something that I didn't even realize until hindsight. And then when I began to get back into creating art and producing illustrations, the difference that I felt within myself was just incredible. I would go to bed at night and I would just feel so happy and so contented, and I never understood the importance of art and of creativity and expression in terms of how it related to your mental health, your well being. And it was just one of those things that maybe we don't understand the power that creativity has. And if we could get to a situation where we lived in a world where people were afforded the opportunity, I just think the world itself would be such a better place to live in.
I agree. But what struck me is that you have to do something different and then you have to discover your path. I did the same. And this is an indication that society as is built now is completely wrong. I mean, it's wrong for many different aspects, from the ecological part, the political part, but this is not a long discourse. But if we live in a society that is money obsessed, so materialistic, and force every kids, everyone, with the education, the school, the family education, and everything, force instructor that is incredibly rigid. Instead of
Hmm.
teaching the kids, you say, okay, what do you love? Whoever you love, man, female, whatever, you have to be free. Choose to, I mean, love whoever you love, or follow your dreams. Try to realize your potential. What do you like to do? You're more, I mean, more an engineer or more an artist? Well, we'll do it. You have to teach people to follow their dreams, to discover what they are, or to create what they want to be. And not just, oh, you want to be an artist, but how can you? The first question, I mean, the first thing that you hear is, oh, you will die, you will starve, you will not
Yeah.
make it, you cannot have a family, you have to have a family. Silence. Everyone has to find or create his own way of living, his own way of creating a family, his own way of creating a living. But we have like labeled as soon as we are born, and you have to follow the direction of the labels. And if you refuse, you pay the price. I mean, I paid the price, and this is the reason why at the end I decided to live in another country, because the price was too high, and I refused to
Yeah.
be crushed like that. And like me, many other peoples, because I mean, the culture you're born can be fun. I mean, every culture is fantastic. Every culture has a beautiful aspect, but every country has a single mood mentality. If you don't fit, it's better to go away. Then I always felt more like citizen of the world. I don't think an
Yeah.
American is better or worse than me as an Italian. I mean, I don't care. The nationality is not important. It's just an accident. It's something that you don't choose. It's something that happens to you. So it's not something that you have a merit or something that you can be proud of, because it's stupidity. I'm proud of the human beings. And with that, for me, a Japanese author, an American author, Italian author, it's just the same. They are authors, brilliant minds. So I'm
Yeah.
anti-nationalist in the absolute way, but it is way free me if you want.
Yeah, that's absolutely beautiful, and it's just when you say that, and I'm sitting here the whole time nodding and thinking, yeah, and I never understand the mindset of people who don't think that way. It's strange, and I remember sitting down and really sort of considering that. especially recently. We did the podcast last week with Kip Elizabeth. They are a fantastic children's illustrator, and I think there's a certain amount of bravery. They are a non-binary identifying illustrator who's putting out children's books that were LGBTQ inclusive for kids. And I remember just thinking that was such a great thing. And one of the things that I had to ask was, do you ever, receive any kind of negative response from people? Thankfully, they never did. But it's one of those things where I kind of tried to sit down and put myself into that mind space of where would someone be coming from when they would put that kind of negativity out to the world, to another person. And then it wasn't until I sat with it for a while, completely perplexed by the whole situation. And I just thought, oh, of course, I don't understand that mindset because that's just not the way I think about the world. Like, I could never
Yeah,
understand anyone who views the world in that way. But it's just one of those strange things. And especially with social media and the world that we have nowadays, for all the
yeah,
positives that it has, there are those strange little areas of the internet that you look at sometime. And it's just it's such an odd perspective to have on the world and to put just negativity towards entire races or genders or sexualities of human beings as if we're not judging people on their actions. Purely, you are this sort of thing, therefore you are in some way wrong. It's a very, very, very unusual mindset. But
yeah,
again, it's one of those things that I always kind of thought that something like that and an outlook like that must stem from someone's internal unhappiness. And
yeah,
again,
of
going
fears.
back to what you were saying,
The
if
fear of,
people were
yeah,
afforded, of course, yeah, and if people were afforded the opportunity to just live in a way that was true to themselves without judgment, not feeling like I have to do this type of job, I have to work this amount of hours, and these are all the things that I need to do. Otherwise, I'll be, outcast from society in some way. I think that's one of the things that would take such a big, big step into creating much more of an open and accepting and loving world for people to live in.
yeah. You started, when we started the interview, you asked me something about fears. But at the end, if you think about carefully, there are just two options, I mean, two outcomes for our fears, to facing our fears. Or you manage to, let's say, cope with your fears, or your fears will control you. So what kind of life do you
Yeah,
want? Do you want to live a life that is completely controlled by your fears? Is I mean, I I have fears that are very difficult to control, like the fears of high. I really
yeah,
hate but I remember I was on the Colorado River. So in the States there was a very strange bridge on this gorge. It was horrible for me. I mean, my knees were shaking because I
yeah,
have fear of heights. I don't want to go there and walk in there. And I said, well, okay, but there is a beautiful landscape for there. What I see there, I cannot see from another point of view. So
yeah,
my boyfriend was there in the middle of the bridge, and I said, you wait for me there. Please don't touch me because I will faint. I'm really, really sick of it. And he said,
yeah,
you wait there. I will concentrate on you because I want to see the landscape. I remember I started walking on the bridge, then I ran because it was too much. I reached the middle of the bridge, I saw the landscape, and I ran back laughing but at the end I did it. I did it. I didn't
exactly. Yeah,
but I made a choice. Refuse to see the landscape because I have irrational fear of heights. I'll say, okay,
yeah,
I fear them is irrational. I cannot fall, so why have to be controlled by my fears? I will be sick because I was sick in the process. But when you have done it, the feeling you have of being proud, of being high, like,
yeah,
wow, it's incredible. And I think this is the way I would like to live.
yeah,
Because in the challenge is the things that I don't want to be scared about them. I want to do them. And yes, sometimes you fail. Sometimes you go on. I'm not scared about the failing things because failing means it's nothing bad. I mean, if something that happened doesn't work, and you correct it will work. That's all.
yeah. I remember we always got, we were actually, I was having this conversation very recently when I was sitting down to do any of the projects that I've kind of took over this year, such as doing the illustration, such as taking my artwork out to craft fairs, or sitting down and doing something like this and producing and making the podcast. Every time I go into those situations, I have that fear. I feel that fear there. But the way I always equate it in my mind is I remember being a child and me and a group of friends would go up and we used to hang around. We're out the backs of some houses, and they used to have these big, tall sheds out the back. And so we would climb up onto the roof of these sheds, and there would be slightly down the hill more sheds that were at a lower level, and we were going to jump from one of the roofs onto the other. And I remember sitting there at maybe, oh wow, we must have been maybe, I don't know, 8, 9 years old. And I had that fear as I'm looking over the edge and I'm looking at this thing that I'm going to go and jump across. And I just would sit for, maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes, just trying to overcome that fear. And then eventually you would build up the courage and you would run and you would jump and you would land across on the other thing. And the exhilaration that comes out the other end of it, that immediately
Yeah,
the thing that took you 30 minutes to do, you go straight and we would do it again. And that's what we did for most of that summer. And I find myself re-experiencing that with art and with putting
yeah.
myself out into the world and undertaking these projects, that every time I have that fear, I just come out of it with such a big high that I come out the other end with it. And it always goes back. I always love the saying, which was, you grow through what you go through. So everything that you go through and experience in your life, it builds you, it builds your character and who you are. And if you can take the positives from every single one of those situations, you'll just continue to develop
Yeah.
who you are, your mindset, your personality. And it's something that I always try to bring into my life more and more, especially these days doing stuff like this. I always try to take a little bit of something good from every single one of those situations.
No, I think it's important. And I mean, you have kids, so you know, I mean, I have, as an uncle, I
Yeah.
hope so. I mean, I have a eternal kid, but with my kids, I love playing with my kids. I mean, as an uncle, I mean, so my brother's sons, but I really like the way a kid look at the world because
Yeah.
is many time is pure, is innocent, but it's not just that. It's that the drawing is drawing, is magical because they just brought to life something that is there, their dreams, their fantasy, the games. But then when you grow, you lose it. And this is the point that is not right. You should never lose it. You always have to keep this kind of playfulness with life. Because at the end, when you die, what do you want to die? As with the mentality of an old man and I never achieved anything because never dared to do anything?
Yeah.
Sad. It's sad. You
It
know, I
certainly
mean,
is. Absolutely.
I have an experience that changed my life, and I want to share it with you. I mean, I lost my mother a few years ago, unfortunately, in a very bad way. I
Very
mean, a few
sorry to
years
hear that.
before moving here to England, so 8 years ago, something like that. It was horrible. And I mean, she was completely paralyzed. It was with the mind working, but the
Yeah.
body no. So it was horrible. She was crying all day. I mean, it's horrible. I remember one of the many hospitals she was there. There was a long corridor, and it was the last room on the right. And so you have to cross all the corridor. And there were a lot of elderly people in the other rooms. And someone was screaming, someone was yelling, someone was very offensive. I feel desperation,
Yeah.
rage, frustration. At the end of the corridor, I stopped and I said, "There's something here." I was really shaking. There's something wrong here. I turned back and I said, "Okay, I'd never be like that. If I reach the age of 80, I want to be the 80 years old man to read love stories, that read books to kids, that laugh, that play, that go to
Yeah.
bicycle, and not the one that is screaming there, yelling offensive things to the nurse because he's no." But then it was not judgmental against her. I said, "You know what kind of life they had." But I found like a sense of loss.
Yeah.
So if we allow people to reach that point, something is really wrong.
Yeah.
And so I said, I don't
No,
want to
I
be like
completely
that.
agree.
And so I made a lot of decisions that day, crossing that corridor. I mean, walking along that corridor. I said, no, no, no. I want this, I want this, I want this. And I'm working to reach that point.
Well, I mean, it's one of those situations where I think that whenever you find yourself in moments where it is very, very trying, like we lost my grandfather there about a year and a half, 2 years ago now, and again, that was one of those situations that I felt restarted my motivation to try and pursue my passions. There was so many little elements that went into it, and I mentioned about the stuff with my kids and wanting to show them that this is a path that they could walk. But there are little moments where we're, I think, faced with extreme adversity, and it's about how we respond to that. And sometimes big and very negative and difficult situations like that can put things into perspective for us of what matters, what is important. And I find myself My grandfather had died, and we did the whole funeral, and we went straight to. He had an interesting funeral because he was not a religious man whatsoever, so we didn't want to go to a church and have a church ceremony. The coffin left his house and went through the town and went all the way to the graveyard. And then when we got to the graveyard, there was no priest, there was no religious official whatsoever, and the speeches there at the graveside were given by my father, my uncle, and then me. And I kind of remember standing in that situation, being completely unprepared, stood in front of this
Mm.
giant group of people, still experiencing the huge grief of the situation because he was one of the most important figures in my life. And I just spoke, and I spoke about him, his life, the way that I felt about him, and the lasting impact that he had had in my life. And it was a real moment where I thought, I need to really take this approach to my own life, where I one day the curtain comes down for me and I need to think about what is the impression people will have of the life that I've led. And I don't want them to say someone who hadn't really followed their dreams, someone who had something so unique to them, but they didn't ever let it out into the world. And I just remember that moment being one of those things where it was the beginning of gears in my head beginning to turn and beginning to make me think more about I need to have a change. I need something different to come along in this path, and I need to be active in chasing down this pursuit of my dreams. And it is just such a strange thing because again, it comes back to that saying: you grow through what you go through, and all of these situations are going to come, and it's just how do you respond to those situations?
Yeah.
What does it elicit within you? And yeah, so when you were saying that story about walking down the corridor, I felt a very, very similar experience in that time, walking behind that hearse, walking through the town, and just thinking, I need to do something different. I need to change what I'm doing with my life. And
Yeah, I don't know what your
it's
dreams are, but I mean, I saw your channel and everything, and for me that is already a big dream because the videos that you're doing are very inspirational. They are very beautiful. They're very technical too. I mean, they are not banal. I mean, I discovered your channel when we entered in contact, and I was
yeah.
overwhelmed with it because it's addictive. You start, I mean, I start drawing the next day, the last days, drawing and listen to you. Sometimes I lost.
Oh,
Oh no, I don't know what to do because now I have to read it. It was, but it's beautiful. I think that
oh, thank
when
you.
we're doing the sharing the ideas and making people communicate with
Yeah.
with themselves, even with others, is the sharing process is really, really important.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. So you're making me blush now. So one thing that I did want to then just talk about, finishing things up. What is next for you? Are there any projects that you're working on at the moment, or any projects that you have coming down the pipeline that you're able to talk about?
Yep, I would like. I mean, I have ideas for children books, and I want to create.
Oh wow.
And I already started to create a very crazy books about mythical beast, narrated by one of my fictional character, the one that I mentioned before, Andrea Aste, the Elizabethan explorer. So it's
Yes.
very whimsical, funny. I'm having a lot of fun in writing and illustrating it. And then I have other projects. Yes, I have to. I was just contacted today for create as an illustrator um, a game, board and cards game. So
Yeah.
very interesting as a concept because it's against the, I mean the waste of food. So it's an educational game. It's interesting,
Yeah.
and I'm looking forward to start because it's very important as a motif for me, as a
Yeah.
philosophy of life. So it's yeah, and then I see what happens. I want to have a huge exhibition in my head that I want to create, and I would like
Yeah.
to create here in this area of England that is North Yorkshire, Durham County, because I
Uh huh.
love it and I would like to do it here. So let's see.
No. I would be really, really. I would love to see children's books done in your illustration style. That would be fantastic. That will be one that I
I
will
will share
definitely
something
have.
then.
I cannot
No, thank
wait.
you. I would like to see yours because when you said I'm working on children, we could say, "Oh, interesting." I would like to see what you're doing because I
I have
saw
one that I'm
something.
working on, and then there's an idea for an entire series. Like I've always wanted to do, because one of the things that I love so much, and I talked about it recently on the show when we had Sean Fitzgerald on. He's an artist who would do a lot of Irish mythological stuff, and I love history. I love mythology. These are things that are my passions, And I always remember that it's something that I discovered much later in life. Like, I didn't kind of grow up with mythology, which is odd because we grew up in a place in Ireland which is very, very close to a very famous mythological site here in Ireland. But I had to kind of go and discover mythology by myself. And I always thought I would love to do a series of children's books that would teach children Irish mythological stories because there's such a rich, rich history and culture there. And so I actually spent a little bit of time recently going through, lists of different Irish mythological stories that I could turn into children's books. And then you're just like, oh, well, lots of murder. Can't really do that one. Oh, that's human sacrifice. Can't really put that in a children's book. So you're trying to whittle down or trying to discover ways that you can appropriately tell children about those things. So I think there'll be a lot of editorial stuff that goes into it beforehand, but
Yeah.
hopefully that'll be one of the projects for the future.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I love mythology, so I'm really
Yeah.
really curious. And mythology coming from your country is really really fabulous. Is amazing. So I'm really curious now.
No. Well, anyway, I am going to stick a link to all of Andrea's social medias, website, everything is going to be down in the description of this video. Do make sure you head over there. There is check out all this incredible artwork that I've been talking about today. It's all going to be down there. Make sure you pop over and say hello and follow him and his work and his journey to see all of the wonderful stuff that he's going to be putting out. And thank you very much for watching.
Thanks to you, and thanks for the viewers, and it was a pleasure. Thank you so much.